Welcome to CBH. Today we're talking about Steve Ditko, co-creator of the Marvel Universe. Now we all know who Stan Lee is, but who is Steve Ditko? Well, Steve Ditko is many great things, but one thing for certain, he is a co-creator and founding father of the Marvel Universe. No one really can say with certainty what was the nature of the creative discussions between him and Stan Lee, but no doubt they, with the help of Jack Kirby, came up with one of the best comic book franchises in history. As we know from the previous blog, Jack Kirby with Stan Lee created the building blocks of the Marvel Universe, but it was Steve Ditko that put an abstract twist on some key items that completed the identity of Marvel and some key characters. We'll break Steve Ditko's contribution down to 5 important details that rounded off Jack Kirby's building blocks into a Marvel identity that was far more complete and intriguing. These 5 things are the visual creation of Spider-Man, including his villains and supporting cast, in 1962, the creation of the Marvel comic cover corner box in the early 1963, the visual creation of Doctor Strange in mid-1963, the revamping of Iron Man's armor in late 1963, and the concept that anger and stress trigger Bruce Banner's transformation into the Incredible Hulk in 1964. In this image, I'm showing what preceded Steve Ditko's contributions, generally from Jack Kirby, and below are Steve Ditko's rather incredible transformations, which significantly transcended the originals. According to Steve Ditko in Robin Snyder's History of Comics Volume 1, Number 5 in 1990, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee worked on a 5-page Spider-Man that Ditko was going to ink. Ditko noticed that the Kirby-Lee Spider-Man origin was like Jack Kirby and Joe Simon's The Fly, a 1959 Archie Comics character which included the same transformative magic ring. He also mentioned that the costume was very much like other Jack Kirby costumes of the time, including costumes like Giant Man or Captain America. Here are their images from Avengers 4 1964. He portrayed that costume in his 2002 essay, An Insider's Part of Comics History, Jack Kirby's Spider-Man, copyright by Steve Ditko. I highly recommend people contact Robin Snyder to purchase the whole essay. It is a riveting read. Steve Ditko also portrayed the difference between his and Stan Lee's contribution in the creation of the character in 1990, shown here with copyright to Steve Ditko. As we can see here, there's a big difference between the name Spider-Man and then the way the character comes out looking on the page. To put it in perspective, there are quite a few Spider-Man in comics, and we'll talk about that in another episode. So this visual creation of Marvel's Spider-Man by Steve Ditko was a huge standout success and a huge jump from Jack Kirby and Joe Simon's Fly character, which is the only Kirby image we have that has any relation to the Kirby-Lee Spider-Man before Steve Ditko got involved. The visual creation of Spider-Man also came with a huge rogues gallery and a supporting cast, which was highlighted in one of the best annuals to date, in Amazing Spider-Man Annual Number 1, 1964, by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee. Spider-Man was of course a slam dunk for Marvel, and there are other blogs that explore how much of his own life he put into Spider-Man. This visual creation was a huge contributor to Marvel's success, but his contributions continue. Ditko wrote that in 1963, he came up with the idea for the Marvel Letterbox on the top left of the comic book cover and showed it to both Stan Lee and Saul Brodsky. In Fantastic Four 18, 1963, Stan Lee confirms that Steve Ditko dreamed up the idea. In 1961, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee wrote Amazing Adventures 1, 1961, and came up with a character named Dr. Jerome. Jerome traveled to Tibet and underwent a transformation to become a crime-fighting mystic. Steve Ditko inked these Kirby-Lee Dr. Jerome stories, and a couple of years later worked with Lee on the same type of plots, but took this type of character to a whole new level when he visually created Doctor Strange in 1963. Stephen Strange also travels to Tibet to become transformed into a mystic. Doctor Strange, with his rogues gallery, became another solid structure in the budding Marvel Silver Age, and to think that Steve Ditko would apply his sensibilities to this Droom-type character and escalated the visual presentation to a whole other magnificent and incredible level. Check out the splash pages in Ditko's cataclysmic Dormammu vs. Eternity pages from Strange Tales 146, 1966. These pages are simply incredible. In the case of Iron Man, we spoke in the Iron Man Jack Kirby episode that he was assembled from various elements and presented in Tales of Suspense 39, 1963. It was a great comic book with the bulky tin-plated armor that became a yellow-gold color as shown in issue 45. However, when Steve Ditko got his hands on the character, he streamlined the character's armor into the red and gold design we all know today, which is significantly successful in current films. The premiere of Steve Ditko's red and yellow suit is unveiled here in Tales of Suspense 49, 1964, with the shedding of the old bulky armor. Of course, this is the armor design that helped put the Marvel film franchise on the map in 2008 with the first Iron Man film. So yes, thank you Mr. Ditko, another in a great series of genius improvements. Steve Ditko's transformative wizardry also extends to the Incredible Hulk. When the Hulk first appeared in issue 1, 1962, he presented as a monster comic who turned his powers on or off depending on if it was night or day. He was essentially a Frankenstein werewolf hybrid type monster that only lasted about 6 issues. Steve Ditko did work on some issues before his cancellation, however the Hulk was brought back in Tales to Astonish with Steve Ditko again helming the character in issue 60, 1964. One key character contribution by Steve Ditko was essentially retconning the character so Bruce Banner transforms into the Hulk whenever he got angry or stressed. The trigger is so key to the character now that no one can really think of the character in any other way, as shown in this meme with a line from the Incredible Hulk TV show of the late 1970s, as well as an image from the Hulk from the 2008 Incredible Hulk film by Marvel Studios. This sense of nervous anxiety of when the stress will come to trigger a transformation puts the Hulk into the unpredictable mobile bomb category that adds much more entertaining uncertainty to his story, and that was yet another fantastic contribution by Steve Ditko. Here is Steve Ditko in his self-portrait and a backup feature of him in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 1, 1964, clearly showing that all jokes aside, he was hard at work expanding, improving, and creating in the 1960s. This has been a fun episode of CBH. It's impossible to study comic book history without running into Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko was clearly more than a co-creator of Spider-Man. It was his wizard-like transformations, along with Jack Kirby's creations, that helped Stan Lee solidify the Marvel brand as well as the Marvel characters. He was relatively new in the game compared to Kirby and Lee, but had up to 9 years of comic book experience before he started these key contributions listed here. His talent can never be ignored, and if anyone wants to know more about him, please buy his essays located online with Robin Snyder. Cheers, and have a good night.